I've got a story for you right now, which we wanted to do for a couple of days, but we've finally got Ian Aitchison on, the man we wanted, former prison governor, author of Screwed, Britain's Prison Crisis and How to Escape It. Ian, very good morning to you. The story that we want to talk to you about, of course, is what Robert Jenrick revealed, Shadow Justice Secretary, a couple of days ago on his own social media account. Britain's prisons are being overrun by Islamist gangs. Self-styled Muslim Brotherhood leaders control wings in many high-security prisons, and instead of isolating them, the system is protecting them, not the officers or the public. I was pretty shocked by that, to be honest.
Right. Were you? Good morning, Mike. I wasn't, unfortunately, but I probably spent too much time thinking about these subjects. Yeah. I mean, we do need special protection from people who want to kill us for ideas. And that is why we have high security prisons in this country to contain terrorist prisoners, the vast majority of whom are Islamist extremists. Yeah. And what we've seen, and Robert Jenrick's comments kind of amplify a story in the Times earlier in the week where an eminent criminal defence barrister, Tony Wyatt, you may have heard of him, yeah. He went into HMP Franklin, which is one of our high security prisons, holding lots of terrorist offenders, and was absolutely staggered by what he saw and what he was being told about the extent of the influence of Muslim gangs, many of which are ideologically dominated, and the lack of action that the authorities in the prisons were taking to contain the problem. And basically what I discovered in 2016, which was at a management level of this threat, and it's a national security threat, was a mixture of incompetence, appeasement, and basically fear. That was replicated in 2022 when the terror watchdog, the government's independent advisor on terrorism, Jonathan Hall, KC, went into prisons to look at terrorism, and he said the situation hadn't improved. And now we have the latest stuff that's coming out of these very closed, secretive places. You don't get much information from them. But it seems to be the situation is getting even worse.
Well, it really does seem like that, doesn't it? And how dangerous are these individuals, and how long are they in prison for? And with these bonds that they're forming inside of prisons, presumably when they do come out, they continue with whatever that structure is.
Well, those are really good questions. I mean, in total, we've only got about 230 people in prison convicted under terrorism legislation. Yeah. But they are in very close proximity to lots of highly violent and credulous, vulnerable young men, often coming into prison to serve very long prison sentences, searching for meaning, searching for security and power. So it's no surprise that they will cleave to gangs. And the dominant gangs inside our high security prisons holding our terrorists do seem to be gangs that have Islamist extremists within them, sometimes directing them. And this struggle for power and control inside prisons goes on all the time. I don't think we're winning it. And it's really important for two reasons. First of all, the most available targets for people who get radicalized by terrorists in prison are prison staff, the men and women that pull on a uniform and do an incredibly brave job looking after these people. And secondly, and it speaks to your point, if we have no control over the spread of Islamist ideology in prisons, we're going to get people who go in and serve sentences not relating to terrorism, who are converted and then go back out into society. Right. And represent a real risk to the public.
Absolutely. Because one of the things that Robert picks up on is he cites Levi Belfield, the killer of schoolgirl Millie Dowler, and other members of grooming gangs who have been kind of co-opted, if you like, by these brotherhood prayer groups and shielded by the people that enforce the kind of gang culture inside of prisons. So they're kind of expanding out even, if you like, beyond those who are there for terrorist activities.
Well, that's highly unusual, and certainly didn't happen in the past, because prisons, like every other institution or society, and there are many societies, have a hierarchy. And sex offenders, or people who committed sexual violence against women, males who did, are definitely at the bottom of the pile. But what we're seeing now is evidence that if those people choose to convert and come under the protection of Islamist or Muslim gangs in prison, they're able to freely walk around the prison under that umbrella, and that's quite extraordinary. The other thing to just mention, Mike, if I may, is excuse me, if we're talking about numbers here, around 18.1% of people in prisons now declare themselves to be Muslim. Right. The community representation of Muslims according to the census is 6.5%. Yeah. So either we're getting a lot more people who are Muslim who are committing crime, and I don't actually believe that to be true, or we are seeing something unique and dangerous happening inside prisons, and that is that people are converting to Islam, at least temporarily, to join the biggest gang in the prison. The biggest gang in the prisons should be His Majesty's Prison and Probation Service, and quite self-evidently that's not the case.
And in days gone by, before this sort of Muslim incarceration, if you like, because I presume 20 years ago we didn't have anything like this number of Muslims in prisons, was there a gang culture, a similar gang culture with other groups of people?
Oh, absolutely, there was, and you know what we're seeing here also is a conflation, I guess, or some sort of arrangement being arrived at by the traditional organised crime gangs who, for example, run drugs coming into prison. We know that drugs are a really serious problem in prison, and you know the conflation of them with ideological gangs. So you've got that added dimension of seriousness. The problem with rampant, out-of-control drugs economy in prisons is you can't have rehabilitation. Well, if you add in Muslim gangs that are at least partially controlled by ideologues, hate preachers, who've got open access to radicalise others, you've got an extraordinarily toxic situation, which I simply don't believe is being taken seriously or is under any sort of control.
And what would you suggest is the way to dismantle these gangs, if there is one?
Well, in 2016, when I did my independent review of Islamist extremism in prisons and probation and youth justice, I recommended the creation of what I called separation units. And those units were specifically to be able to isolate the hate preachers, the highly subversive ideologues who were at risk of radicalizing others and totally incapacitate them. And that recommendation was accepted. I think those units are vastly underutilised. In fact, I go further, and there's plenty of evidence to suggest the prison service never wanted this as a solution and almost set them up to fail. So those units are constantly under strength, and almost, you know, that is used as an excuse to say, well, it's not working. I just don't think there is the will or the leadership or the attitude there to be able to go after, on the basis of intelligence, people who are poisoning the minds of vulnerable and highly dangerous individuals in our high security prisons and get them out of circulation. That probably needs some ministerial direction. Dominic Raab was the last person to say, we've got these units, why aren't we using them? I think Shabana Mahmood needs to take a leaf out of his book now and say, we've got to bear down on these people because they are creating time bombs, effectively. People who are radicalised and go out into society again after release, who are going to commit atrocious crimes.
And finally, do you think we should be building more prisons? Are you one of those? I think we should, but, you know, you're the expert.
Oh, well, we are building more prisons. We're barely keeping pace with the amount of people we lock up. I'm one of these traditionalists. I think we absolutely should have prisons for people who are highly dangerous. We need to lock them up for a very long time, if necessary, to reduce that dangerousness and, if possible, to fit them for a release back into the community. And, you know, with the time and space that cleared prisons would create, we'd be able to do a much better job. So we're stopping tomorrow's rapists, tomorrow's murderers, tomorrow's sexual violence, and so on. At the minute, we can't do that. Our prisons are full to bursting. What I would want to do is clear the prison landings of people, in the words of my good friend, Professor John Podmore, who are nuisances, and fill those places with people that we're scared of, and actually do some work with those people. So I think, you know, we're heading for bust again in 6 or 8 months' time. We haven't been able to build ourselves out of this problem, and we're going to have to take some very tough decisions. I don't believe that emergency mass release, badly mishandled, of just anybody that, you know, fits a criteria that's designed to give, you know, five minutes headroom is a sensible and strategic way forward. We've got to imprison dangerous people, and we've got to have different solutions for others, including those who, for example, commit crimes that aren't violent as a result of drug addiction.
Yeah. Great to talk to you, Ian. We must do it more often. Thank you very much indeed. Ian Aitchison there, absolute voice of common sense on prisons. It's so refreshing, isn't it, to hear somebody who says, yeah, we need to lock people up who are dangerous. We don't need to let them out. We don't need to give them an ankle bracelet and say wander about the community until you can beat somebody else up over the head with an iron bar. No, you go to prison. You stay in prison, and when you're in prison, you don't get to join a Muslim gang. Sorry, You know, Ian Aitchison there, former prison governor, author of Screwed. He's got a great book, by the way. You've got to read it. Britain's Prison Crisis and How to Escape It. A traditionalist. Thank goodness there's still people like him left.